Welcome to the second episode of the Global Partnership Podcast. I am your host, Zain Duda. As you know, the Global Partnership for Effective Development Corporation is a unique multi-stakeholder platform that brings together development actors to advance the effectiveness of their development efforts, to deliver long-lasting results, and to contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, including the commitment to leave no one behind. In our last episode, we talked about several aspects regarding ownership and inclusion in country-level development strategies. Today, we turn to development partners to see how effectively they are supporting the implementation of these country-led strategies. Let's start with one of the key findings of the 2019 Global Partnership Monitoring Progress Report. A fact that could have potential implications not only for country ownership but for many other aspects of development, cooperation, and its effectiveness. This key finding can be summarized as follows. The alignment of development partners to partner country priorities and country-owned results frameworks is declining. This means, for example, that development partners use less objectives and results indicators defined by partner countries when designing and implementing new programs and interventions. This is especially true for bilateral partners. It is worth noting that the Global Partnership Indicator regarding the alignment of the development partners to country priorities and systems is recognized by the UN Statistical Commission as proxy to assess progress on SDG Target 17.15 titled Respect each country's policy space and leadership to establish and implement policies for poverty eradication and sustainable development. In our previous episode, Mr. Ronald NKUSI, Rwanda's Director for the External Finance Unit, explained how ownership can be a source of effective development cooperation. Today, we would also like to start with Mr. NKUSI's opinions about the importance of alignment between development partners and country priorities and results frameworks.
Alignment is very central because you want to use less resources you have for bigger impact that you want to create. But second, you need to make sure that you are supporting the recipient government to own the plans they have. Once they define those plans, you as a donor, you need to actually align to those plans so that you create that sense of ownership. If you don't do that and you have your parallel, priorities or your parallel implementation arrangements, you're shifting actually some focus away from what you should be doing to make sure this government is owning whatever is being done. I think in my view, that's the whole point really, that you have to align to enforce ownership and promote accountability.
Now, after listening to a country's point of view, we would also like to reflect on a development partner's perspective. For that, we asked Ms. Marie OTTOSON. She is the Deputy Director of the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency, SIDA. Ms. OTTOSON, what is your point of view regarding this decreasing alignment between the development partners and country priorities and results?
When it comes to alignment to partner countries, for example, you would find in all our steering documents that it spells out very clearly that we believe in alignment, for example. And we do believe that we are a principal development partner. Sometimes it is not as easy when it comes to practice because from our perspective, it's very important to stand up for the human rights-based approach. We do have a feminist foreign policy, which means that everything that we do is based on the human rights-based approach and the feminist foreign policy. Sometimes they are in conflict with the principle of national ownership in a specific partner countries. And it is fair to say that in those circumstances, it is a conflict of interest. To us, it is still important for us then to stick up for the principles of continue to promote democracy, human rights, and gender equality, for example, even in some cases where countries are becoming more authoritarian, for example.
Okay, so far we have explored the decreased reliance on country-defined results. Now, we will further explore other factors that can affect successful implementation of development cooperation plans. One such factor is predictability of development cooperation, that is, the confidence a partner country has about the amount and timing of disbursements from their development partners in future years. And as Mr. NKUSI says, predictability is important because
how do you plan for what you don't know? You just plan with what you know and what you can afford to effectively quantify, because you don't want, again, to make promises to the citizens, to the population, that I'm going to be doing A, B, and C, and D, when actually you don't have the resources that match those ambitions.
The report shows that in spite of continuous commitments to improve predictability, on average, annual predictability has only marginally improved since 2011. Importantly, medium-term predictability, or forward visibility, of development cooperation at country level is weakening. Ms. OTTOSON, in your opinion, why is this happening?
I think that when it comes to predictability and so on, I think that we also need to see that we need to look at things slightly differently from what we have done in the past. Because if I can link that to when it comes to ownership, for example, I said to you before that that is something that we have in our steering document and so on. And it used to be very much that we saw that that should be defined and anchored by the state. I think that today it should not only be defined and anchored by the state, but we can also relate this to those directly affected. We need, as I said before, we need to address this differently from what we have done in the past. And then I think if we do that and if we work together, it is possible to find new solutions.
Until now, we have mainly explored interactions between countries and their development partners on development cooperation. We know that in order to successfully achieve the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the SDGs, we will need global partnerships that bring together all parts of society. To reflect on this whole of society approach, and particularly from the point of view of civil society organizations, we asked Ms. Beverly LONGID to participate in today's episode. She is with the Indigenous Peoples constituency and also co-chair of the Civil Society Organization Partnership for Development Effectiveness, also known as CPDE. Ms. LONGID, we know that civil society's full contribution to sustainable development requires an enabling environment for CSOs to operate, and the latest data shows negative trends in this respect. Can you please share your views on what is driving this, and particularly what development partners need to do to better enable CSOs to play their important role?
Probably we would have to frame it like how do development partners appreciate the issue of an enabling environment? Because if they do not recognize civil society as part of the development cooperation, or they do not recognize civil society as a partner or contributor of development, I mean, that will always guide the way they will handle or respond to civil society initiatives. Much still has to be desired, no, when it comes to an enabling environment. And it's not only, because some CSOs would look at the issue of enabling environment, having a representative in the process or in the mechanism. But for me, I think when you speak of an enabling environment, it's something comprehensive, that it also includes respect of human rights of communities or people's organizations, because it would sound hollow if you do have CSO representation, but then the reality is at village level, at the unions, at the factories, at the schools, does not reflect a recognition or promotion of human rights. It's a question of not only enabling environment and human rights, but also transparency and accountability, especially for governments. And governments may probably argue, how come it's only us? Well, for one, you are the state in power. You are the ones who have control of resources. And you are, in most cases, you direct the directions of policies in the countries that you rule in. Unlike civil society, that we have to fight for representation. And in many cases, this representation is even removed or limited.
Overall, global partnership data tells us that stakeholders perceive a decrease in how well development partners work with CSOs. The perception among CSOs in most partner countries is that consultation with development partners is unpredictable and not systematically conducted. Ms. OTTOSON, as a development partner, what is SIDA's point of view on these matters?
I think that our approach is slightly different than some of the other donors because we do believe in supporting the civil society organization in its own rights. And that is not what everyone else is doing. I think to us it is very, very important that we both provide funding to civil society, but not only funding. As I said, we do believe in supporting them in its own right, but we also believe very much in having a strong partnership with civil society. We want them to be with us on this journey as well. And that does not only go for civil society. We see that we need to have partnership with the private sectors. We have set up quite a lot of partnership these last couple of years. We have a partnership with the big investors, with the big private companies in Sweden, but we also have with different government public agencies here in Sweden on how to reach the Agenda 2030. And we have different networks meeting with the civil society where we don't discuss the funding, but where we discuss how to achieve, for example, the Agenda 2030 and other interesting topics. I think it is very important to see them as an equal partner. I think that is very much one way as well as moving forward.
One last finding from the report states that more detailed information on financial support to CSOs would increase transparency and accountability towards citizens. While development partners in 40% of partner countries report that they make available detailed information on their support to CSOs, this was agreed to by CSOs in only 11% of partner countries. Governments in 11% of countries and CSOs in 14% of countries reported that they believe information is not available on the majority of development partners' support to international and domestic CSOs working in the country. The report highlights the need for transparency regarding flows for CSOs to enhance the accountability of CSOs in partner countries towards their citizens. Now, Ms. LONGID, what do you see driving these results, and what do you think is the impact of lack of public information?
The issue of access to information is very, very much limited, and probably government would be more than open to give information in relation to their vision, their mission. But when it comes to like asking budget, the data in relation to budget or financial systems, it's very, very difficult to get this. So even the kind of critique that civil society is able to give is also limited by the access to information. Second, if there is access, it's the kind of information that they are given. And third, how timely is the information that is given. In many cases, they don't have access, they are given the wrong information, or the information is already like a scale. It doesn't have any use. So enabling environment, transparency and accountability, and access to information. I think these are important factors to consider in any partnership.
This reminds us that effectiveness involves mutual accountability, meaning that across the topics, stakeholders have their own responsibility and commitments, and progress requires action by everyone. Advancing this agenda also requires regularly taking stock amongst partners on keeping promises made, where we are progressing, and where there is still room for improvement. Global monitoring is one vehicle for this, but country-level mechanisms are vital to facilitate this dialogue and mutual assessments. The report shows that 45% of partner countries have quality mutual accountability mechanisms in place. And as importantly, the vast majority of development partners reported that mutual accountability assessments were effective in informing the ways of working in the country. This confirms the need to continue investing in mutual accountability at both global and country levels. And with this, we have arrived at the end of the episode. We would like to thank our guests, Mr. Ronald NKUSI, Ms. Marie OTTOSON, and Ms. Beverly LONGID for their valuable contributions. If you would like to further explore the topics discussed in this episode, please check out the 2019 Global Partnership Progress Report. You will be able to find it at the Global Partnership website, effectivecorporation.org. You can also follow the partnership's latest news on facebook.com/devcorporation and on Twitter @devcorporation. That's it for today. Thank you very much for your attention.